currently in my 8th month of pregnancy, dealing with severe morning sickness, yet my husband offers no help. It feels like he's grown colder than before my pregnancy, rather than being supportive, which makes me worry about the postpartum period. I suffer most from scent-triggered nausea, being particularly sensitive to the smell of cooking, especially fried foods, which makes preparing meals a struggle. This morning sickness hasn't eased even in the later stages of my pregnancy. Despite my attempts to explain, my husband fails to understand the severity of my morning sickness. His comments cut deep. "You just lie around without cooking when I get home. Can you really be a mother?" One evening, he came home late from overtime, and the sweet scent on him overwhelmed me, causing me to vomit right then and there. Instead of showing concern, he coldly remarked, "Ugh. This is just awful," and left the room in a huff, starting to sleep in a different room from that day on. Both my parents and my in-laws' homes are quite a distance away, making it difficult to ask for help. Also, having them stay over might make me more stressed, so I hoped we could manage until I returned to my parents' house for the childbirth. I've been juggling work and household chores without any support from my husband, and during my 8th month prenatal checkup, I was diagnosed with threatened preterm labor and had to be hospitalized immediately. I regretted pushing myself too hard and felt guilty towards my unborn child. When I informed my husband, his only response was that he was too busy with work to visit the hospital. There was no sign of him coming to the hospital, nor any words of concern for me or our baby. I regretted working so hard on household chores and my job, putting my child's life at risk, all because my husband did nothing around the house. If only my husband had been more understanding about pregnancy, things might have been different. Why do I have to go through all this alone? I wondered. I knew I needed to rest for the sake of my baby, so I tried to stay calm and rested. 2 weeks later, I was discharged from the hospital safely. On the advice of my parents, I decided to go back to my family home. My husband was still absorbed in his work. Throughout the 2 weeks of my hospitalization, he never visited once. I had kept him updated via text during my stay, but he barely responded, and when I informed him of my discharge and decision to stay at my parents' house, he simply replied, "Say hi to your parents for me." I had hoped he would come to greet my parents and perhaps bring some of my things from our house, but after a message about being busy at work, he became unreachable. So, I ended up going to our house with my sister to collect my things. Entering the house, something felt off. It was clean, unusually clean. Due to my morning sickness and inability to clean properly, our home had felt somewhat gloomy, but now it was tidy and cleaned up. My sister looked around the living room and kitchen, seemingly impressed. Could my husband have cleaned this well? Did he hire a housekeeping service? Maybe he's finally realizing his role as a father. I hope, I thought as I went to the bedroom to grab my hospital bag. Entering the bedroom, a familiar sweet scent hit me. Not fabric softener, but perfume. And I recognized that scent from somewhere. While trying to recall, my sister called me. She was checking the visitor history on the intercom monitor, showing who had visited while we were away. She let out a surprised, "Huh?" The screen showed the same woman visiting multiple times. My sister seemed to recognize her. She started, revealing a shocking fact. 2 days after I was hospitalized for threatened preterm labor, I had asked my sister, who had come to visit me, to bring some clothes from our home. When she went to our apartment early in the morning before work to collect them, using the key I gave her, she saw my husband and an unknown woman leaving together. Shocked, she followed them discreetly and saw them enter his office. She suspected an affair but didn't want to stress me while I was hospitalized, so she kept quiet. The woman who appeared repeatedly on the intercom was the same one my sister saw that day. I remembered vomiting from the sweet scent I smelled beside my husband during my morning sickness. It was the same scent I had just smelled in the bedroom. I realized it must have been the perfume of the woman he was having an affair with. Knowing that he had been cheating on me since then, and that he had brought another woman into our home while I endured a painful hospital stay alone, I decided to divorce him. I instinctively felt that having such a husband, who didn't care about me or our unborn child and was infatuated with another woman, was harmful to both me and my baby. I don't need him. I will protect this child myself. That's what I decided. I gave birth to a baby boy on the day before my due date, after deciding to divorce. The birth took 5 hours, but it's amazing how much love you feel for your own child. I understood the feeling of being able to do anything for my child. Motherhood is powerful. I didn't contact my husband at all. More than a month after our last contact and a week after the due date, he finally realized something was wrong and contacted me. I ignored all his messages and calls. I couldn't answer when my child or I were sleeping, or during breastfeeding, diaper changes, or baths. And I certainly wouldn't answer while taking priceless photos of my child. I decided to ignore him completely, but 3 days later, he finally called my parents' house. "Why aren't you contacting me at all?" he shouted angrily. "Well, you didn't read my messages when I was in the hospital, so I didn't feel like contacting you," I retorted with a fair point, a result of his past behavior. "It can't be helped that I'm busy with work. You're relaxing at your parents' house for the childbirth, so you should at least contact me properly," he said, clueless about the hardships of pregnancy and childbirth. I felt a surge of anger. "How can you think I'm relaxing with a newborn baby? Are you stupid? What? The baby's already born. Why didn't you tell me?" "I just told you, I don't feel like contacting someone who doesn't read my messages. But since you called, I'll report. I safely gave birth to a boy the day before the due date. Is that okay?" "What do you mean by that? It's our child, isn't it? Why are you just reporting to me, the father, after the fact? When I was suffering from morning sickness and hospitalized for threatened preterm labor, you didn't worry about me or your son at all, only about yourself. How can you dare claim to be the father? You have no right to call yourself a father for bringing another woman into our home when I was risking my life giving birth to our son." I hung up on him. I had planned to confront him with evidence of his affair and demand compensation, but hearing his voice after so long just made me explode with irritation. I told my parents about his affair and my decision to divorce. They also disapproved of my husband's attitude and immediately agreed. Since then, my parents handled all calls from my husband, allowing me to focus on childcare and preparing for divorce. A while after my son turned 1 month old, as expected, my husband started bombarding my phone with calls. He complained that all the furniture and appliances in our house were gone. "Hey! Everything's gone from inside our house. Why is everything missing?" I could tell from his voice that he was panicking. His reaction was just as I expected. In fact, I moved out of the apartment we were renting right after my son's 1-month checkup. My husband had been too lazy to handle the rental contract, so it was in my name. That allowed me to move out without telling him. He was barely coming home, seemingly spending most of his time at his mistress's place. When I entered our home, the atmosphere was heavy. The kitchen was a mess with dried up, dirty containers from frozen meals left around, and some instant noodle cups even had mold growing in them. Sighing at the worse-than-expected condition of the room, I opened the windows to air out the place and started cleaning and packing. Then the moving company I had hired arrived, and we began the moving process. To make the most of the time my husband was away at work during the weekdays, I opted for a moving plan that included packing and a cleaning option, leaving almost everything to the professionals. It was easy since all I had to do was manage the fragile and valuable items and give instructions for packing. The movers efficiently packed and transported everything to the truck, completing the task by noon. True professionals. My husband's belongings were sent to his parents' house, while mine were taken to my parents' home. In the afternoon, I had a buyer come to dispose of the unwanted furniture, leaving the house empty by evening. I'm good at organizing things. I explained the situation to my flustered husband over the phone. "Didn't I mention? I didn't renew the lease for the apartment and moved out." "What? Why did you move out without telling me? Where am I supposed to go now? You've been going to your girlfriend's house lately, so just go there. I broke up with her. I realized you and our son are what's important to me. You must be joking. She got fed up with you and kicked you out, right?" I had already had a detective agency investigate them both and knew my husband's whereabouts. He had been staying at his girlfriend's house, acting like a tyrant, which irritated her as she wasn't his maid. They had frequent arguments, as the report indicated. I got kicked out with just a suitcase. What should I do now? Such a pathetic voice. He brought this upon himself. Just rent a place for yourself. From now on, let's communicate through lawyers, okay? Bye. As I hung up, I heard him calling my name, which made me laugh so hard that my stomach hurt. Later, I heard he rented a monthly apartment. One day, my husband suddenly showed up at my parents' house. Despite my parents asking him to leave, he insisted on talking to me. Hearing my mother's troubled voice, I reluctantly went to the entrance. What? You're causing a disturbance here. Finally, you came out. Please, just hear me out. He was desperate, as I had been cutting off all communication, directing it through lawyers. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't do anything even though I became a father. I didn't feel like a father, felt lonely, and even cheated. I'm really sorry and have reflected on my actions. I realized I can't be without you. Let's start over as a family of 3. He knelt at the doorstep, thinking this gesture would settle everything. I don't need someone who can't manage without me when it's time to raise a child. A big baby is just a nuisance. A big baby? You mean me? Who else? Where's dinner? Where are my socks? The house is dirty. My son is less trouble than you. I couldn't help but sigh. Then my mother-in-law appeared. Sorry, Kate. He's always been full of excuses. I apologize. My father-in-law followed. Listening to this, it's nothing but childish excuses. Why are you here, Dad, Mom? He was stunned to see his parents, who had appeared unexpectedly. Why? To see our grandson, of course. He's so adorable. We want to visit him every day, not just once a week. My husband and I started dating as adults, but we went to the same high school, which was why our parents' homes were in the same city and quite close. They had been visiting every weekend to see their grandson. Our fathers were fans of the local sports team, and our mothers were fans of a certain idol group. They got along well due to shared interests, and I had a good relationship with my in-laws. I had informed them about the birth and introduced my son to them soon after being discharged from the hospital. I also told them about my husband's affair and his cold attitude during my pregnancy, and that I wanted a divorce. They apologized and respected my decision. My in-laws were completely smitten with their grandson and condemned their own son. Why would someone who betrayed such a cute grandson and Kate come here? You think kneeling will solve everything? Men can't just work and think that's enough. Someone who only works is just a nuisance. It was hard hearing this from his parents, but it was all true. You don't have to be eaten like a male mantis, but you should be that devoted. My mother-in-law's excited analogy was too funny. So, you're saying you can't make your wife and our grandson happy, right? Right. Until you fix your pampered attitude, you're not welcome here. Does that mean I can't come for holidays? Of course. I won't forgive anyone who hurts my adorable grandson. Even if it's my son, I'll disown him. Let's handle the rest through lawyers. With that, my in-laws went back to the living room where my son was. Everyone was stunned. I kicked my clinging husband out, cutting ties with such a fool. After that, we communicated through lawyers and finalized the divorce. I received proper alimony and child support. I also claimed compensation from his mistress. Their relationship became a rumor at their workplace, and the mistress, feeling uncomfortable, resigned. My husband continued working, enduring the cold stares of female colleagues, to pay child support. He sends postcards to his parents, but my mother-in-law says they're just full of excuses and a nuisance. As for me, I'm still living with my parents. I considered renting an apartment nearby, but my parents, being doting grandparents, want me to stay. I'll continue to live here even after my maternity leave ends, using the work-from-home system. It's a relief not to raise my child alone, and it's a way to repay my parents' kindness.